Hey guys, Frank here coming to you with another episode of Modern Church Leader, joined today by Jeremy Malick. Jeremy, what's going on, man?
Not much, just enjoying here and being with everybody out here. So
Hey, hanging out on the podcast. So it's good to
that's
have
right.
you. I'm excited to talk about like fundraising. Obviously Tithely was kind of started because we wanted to help churches, uh, be funded and help them do better in the digital age and using technology for raising money and fundraising and all that. So, this is a cool kind of intersection of what you do and what Tithely does and all that. But why don't you start off by
Absolutely.
just telling folks a little bit about yourself and how you got into, connected with the church and ministry and all the way
Sure.
into your business today.
Sure. Well, my name's Jeremy Malick, and I actually grew up as a church planter's son, which meant we moved around and we'd start a new church every couple of years. And then, so we lived in about 5 or 6 different states when I was growing up. And then when I went to college, I went to a Christian college in the Midwest and actually never thought I would go into ministry. So I got my business degree and that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
through that process, I went into banking and I was a commercial lender and ended up running a large section of a mortgage company in the Midwest for 11 years. And in 2007, God put a call in my life to go into ministry. And so at the first church I was at, I got to do the 4 different skill sets we do at churches today. And it went so well, I started having churches call afterwards and saying, "Hey, could you come help us out? Could you come help us out?" And by 2015, we launched Church Coach Ministries full time and have been doing it ever since and just love it.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So what was it like to grow up as a church planter's son?
Well, I actually really liked it and enjoyed it because I was easily adaptable into new areas. So I have different pockets of friends from different places where we've lived, and I've
Yeah,
still at least kept 1 or 2 friends from all these years growing up in different areas. So for that part, I've really enjoyed it. It's helped me like dive into new areas and not have any issue with doing that.
right, right. Yeah. Having to every few years go new school, new friends,
Yep.
new activities or sports teams or whatever you were into. I mean, that can be tough on a kid.
Yep.
But
Absolutely.
it sounds like you kind of developed the skill set to do that pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. I've enjoyed it. So.
Yeah. What states were you in? Where'd you end up traveling to?
So we were in Indiana on 3 different occasions. We started at church in Palm Harbor, Florida, and then we were in Southern California. I graduated from Newbury Park High School, which is in Thousand Oaks area,
Yeah.
California, and then we were in Colorado and Colorado Springs as well. So a lot of different spots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And when you went into full-time ministry, what role were you in? What were you doing at the church?
So my first role in ministry was as an executive pastor.
Okay.
And I really enjoyed that. And I got to bring in a lot of things I learned from the business world and apply them to the church world.
Right.
And so that was really exciting to do.
Yeah. And when you were in that role, was sort of the finances and the kind of fundraising side of the church, like there's regular giving that,
Hmm.
is happening, but then there's sometimes churches do fundraising campaigns to raise money for a project or a building or a school they want to build or to fund
Hmm.
missions. Like there's all kinds of
Sure.
reasons that they might do extra fundraising campaigns. Were
Hmm.
you responsible for kind of those programs at your church?
Yeah. So at the church that I was at, they had already previously hired an outside campaign consultant company and it wasn't going very well. So
Right.
the elders got together and they actually voted for me to take it over. And I was like, well, I've been at the church 3 months and I've never done this before, but let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that was one of the advantages of looking outside of the box and my experiences in the business world and designing a type of campaign that you won't see out there typically. And so in that, it gave a freshness and a different look at it. And
Right.
so I actually think that experience helped me through it. So
Right. Yeah. Totally. Um, I mean, how'd the campaign go?
campaign went really well. What we were doing is we were converting a boat showroom into a church. And so I had the opportunity to do the design of the interior of that.
Oh, that's
And I
cool.
had an architectural background. And then I had the opportunity to raise funds for it. And one of the cool things about this was it was a $500,000 tenant improvement job. And we ended up raising enough funds to do the job. But because of some techniques I learned in the business world, I have a philosophy that just because you raise the money doesn't mean you have to spend it. And we actually did the entire remodel of that project for $84,000 in cash. We had all of the materials for the project actually donated. A funny story is I like to work out at LA Fitness at the time in Southern California is where this
Yeah.
church was. And they were putting in 51 LA Fitnesses in Southern California at the time. And I was working out one day and I loved their carpet. It was this black specs carpet. And I thought, man, this is great carpet. And so I just asked, who would I talk to about this carpet? And
Right.
the manager gave me the phone number for the general manager. And I said, do you have any extra carpet in the back? And they took me to the back and they had 2 rolls. I quickly did the math. If every one of these things had 2 rolls of carpet, well, they had plenty of carpet for our church plant. And so I ended up taking the general manager out to lunch. Imagine he likes to eat. And I just asked him directly, would you donate the carpet to our church plant? We need about 28,000 square feet of carpet. He made 3 calls across the desk from me, and they actually delivered the carpet to our church, and then we installed it ourselves. And so so those kinds of things are what we do with churches that are totally outside the box, but God provides. So
That's awesome. That's so cool, man. Well, all right. So fast forward now, Church Coach Ministries, you've been doing this since 2015, you said?
Correct. Correct.
I mean, tell us, I mean, I guess go a little deeper, like why did you start it and what specifically, do you guys do for churches?
So I had spent time being an executive pastor in local churches on a couple different occasions. And I remember going through a period of time in my life where I was praying and fasting to the Lord, like, what do you want me to do next? And I was getting all these phone calls from other churches to do campaigns for them. And so God just really put on my heart, Jeremy, you could help one church, but I'd rather you help many. And so from that word from the Lord is when we birthed Church Coach Ministries. And it's been an amazing ride ever since. And we've been able to work with churches in 4 different categories. I'll just share quickly. We do build out design work, and we do it very simplistically in the sense of we redesign the inside of the facility through the eyes of the guest and what they will experience. Really, for the next 100, 200 people we're going to reach for Christ. We focus on relationship connecting areas, and we focus on ministry flow of the facility. And so in doing this, I go into a lot of churches where they have $60,000, $80,000 worth of blueprints sitting in a corner that they've never even touched. And so what we do is we come give them a concept, AutoCAD drawings, 3D renderings at an extremely affordable cost. That way they can get an idea if they want to move forward without breaking the bank.
Right.
And so that's kind of our philosophy there. And then we do an assimilation training with churches, and that's a 4-month-long training that we do that we really help churches connect with the community through it. And so we do a lot of missional pieces where we get people in the congregation to think missionally without them even realizing they're doing it. So it becomes second nature. And then we do a stewardship training with churches. And then finally, we do the vision campaigns, which we're going to dive into. Right. So those are our 4 areas.
Yeah. Very cool. Have you always done all 4? Did you kind of launch?
Yep. No, we've always done all 4. For some reason, God gave me a unique skill set, and that has been our 4. And we have not waved or moved off of it. That has been our focus.
Yeah. So. You keep saying we. Did you start it with somebody?
Yeah, so we have a team. We have a team of people. My wife Nicole works with us. We have a gentleman from Waco, Texas, that works with us. We have a gentleman from North Carolina that's on our team. Yeah, and way out, we have somebody on our team from Hawaii, of all places. Nice. So it's been really good to see the team grow and God bring us the right people at the right time. And interestingly enough, most people that are on our team, almost all of them, have actually gone through a vision campaign at their church and said, you know what, I love this so much, I want to be part of it. So that's how we built our team.
Yeah, I love that. When you started it, was it just you?
Yep. I was a one-armed paper hanger.
You were like, oh, that's awesome. So vision campaigns, or maybe known as capital campaigns to some. Tell us more. Like what what is a
Sure.
vision like, because some people may not know. So let's start
Yeah.
with,
Sure.
what is a vision campaign? Why do churches even run these things?
hmm
Give us kind of
hmm
the nuts and bolts.
So for us, we have a simple philosophy. Our philosophy is we serve a rich God. And oftentimes, because of our human thought processes and everything, we actually make God poor. We put God in a box, or we set an expectation upon Christ. And what we want to do is we want to take that box we so often put around Christ, and we just want to shatter it.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, we want to take people in the congregation through an intentional prayer journey. And here's what's so different is our purpose is actually the heart transformation of the individual within the congregation. So we want people in the congregation to actually experience four different things. And the four things are, we want to give them opportunity to pray. That's obvious. The second one is we want to give them an opportunity to process with the Lord. And what I mean by this is, when I was at the first church I was at, I would lead the men's ministry, and I'd meet with 2 or 3 men at a time. And I would always ask the question to the men, what does the voice of the Lord sound like to you? And you know how many men could answer that question? It wasn't very many.
Right.
And so what we would do is we would study the Old Testament and all the different ways that the Lord spoke to people. And we would journal those down. And then I would have them journal their own life and write down key decision moments and different impact times in their life. And they would start to draw parallels. Well, what we want to do is we want to create this environment where they can actually hear the Lord's voice and identify it for themselves, for some people, for the very first time.
Yeah.
And then in this process, we want to give them the ability to ask questions, because oftentimes unasked or unanswered questions become blockades or hindrances to people's obedience. And then the final step really is we want to give them the opportunity to commit to the vision of the church. And this is what's so important, because committing to the vision of the church is a unifying decision, as opposed to them just doing a one-off, okay, I'll pay for a new kitchen or a new playground. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but when they go through this process, they come out of it unified. So that's really the difference between a capital campaign and a vision campaign.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, I love that, you're helping people kind of connect with, hearing God in their own personal lives. Comes with a lot of Old Testament study and prayer. And I would assume, maybe you can tell me, but like the leadership of these churches probably really love that approach to,
Mm-hmm.
working with their people, and even you helping them as a leadership have this kind of defined thing with some structure and but prayer and Bible study
Yeah.
being a core part of it over a period of time. Are you doing this over many, many months?
Yeah. So when we journey with the church, we'll journey with them, to be honest with you, for a year, 18 months,
Yeah.
sometimes 2 years, depending on the project size and the scope. And so one thing to kind of answer that thought that you had, but the lead pastor of a church really enjoys this process, because we make it easy for them in the sense that we're decentralizing the leadership aspect to a campaign. And then we give the lead pastor one job and one job only, and that is casting vision.
Mm-hmm.
And most lead pastors love to cast vision.
Right.
And so we actually help implement that vision as far as funding it financially
Right.
goes through this process.
Yeah.
So,
Take us maybe a step down,
mhm.
practically speaking. So you're leading people through this kind of journey, spiritual journey. What is the end goal? In some sense, is financial, though, right? It is,
Mhm.
we're trying to raise some amount of money for some kind of project.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
so when it
Yes.
comes down to, okay, you've got like the spiritual journey that everyone's going on together, the unifying journey. How do you go about, or what are people coming to you for? Like, what kinds of projects are people coming to you
Sure.
for, mostly?
Well, we're doing everything from debt reduction of a mortgage payment to full scale new builds and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
So really, we do go to all scope. And one of the thing that's really unique about our approach is a church doesn't have to have a decision made exactly what they want to do to their facility to move forward in doing this, because no matter what they choose, they're going to need the finances to move forward anyway.
Right.
So when somebody's committing to the vision of the church, they're not necessarily committing to an exact project, but the vision of the overall church as a
Got it.
whole.
Got it.
So,
So it doesn't have
yeah.
to be, oh, we're putting a new roof on.
Sure.
say. It can be much bigger than that. That may be one piece of it, but there could be a bunch of things tied to it over a long, a 10-year journey, maybe, right? That the church
Hmm.
is going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What about the practical fundraising steps along the way? How do
Hmm.
you,
Sure.
give us that frame?
So one of the things that we do, I'm going to give you two different pieces of that. One of the things we do in this process is we do our 2-session stewardship course as part of the prayer journey process. And what's interesting about that is God took me through a transformational process in my own life as it pertained to the subject of dishonest gain. And so I actually went away when I was kind of going in between being a commercial lender and going into the mortgage world. And I went away and visited my roommate at college, and Saturday night rolled around and he was like, "Hey, do you want to go to church with me?" And I was thinking, the last place I kind of want to go is church. I'm trying to get away, and of course, God always comes and gets you. And so anyway, at that point in time, I went, and it was a very unique sermon topic. And the topic was on dishonest gain. And I was riveted on the edge of my seat. And I walked out of there committing to be a generous giver from that point forward. And then also, in that process, God dealt with dishonest gain in my own life. And I would take clients out golfing for the bank, and I could never fill up the foursome. So I'd add in a buddy or two, and I would expense my buddy to the bank. And God's like, "That's done." And I'm like, "Cool." And so anyway, I developed this 2-session course, and what it has to do with is, what does it mean to be obedient to Christ, not only with our finances, but with our lives? And then the second session, we come back and we talk about what types of abundant blessings does Christ have for our lives if we're obedient to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, what this process does is this puts the individual that goes through the course, the person within the congregation, into a spot where the light will come on and they really have a choice to make. Am I going to be obedient to Christ with my life, or am I not? And we are seeing tremendous heart transformation take place through this. So I say all that to get to this point to answer your question is, as we go through the practical steps of this, yes, when the congregation commits to the vision of the church, they're going to be making a pledge to the church over probably a 3, 4, 5-year period, depending on the size of the project.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is through the power of prayer, we are walking through the doors that the Lord opens. And a lot of times the Lord opens up doors that we walk through that allows us to connect with the community and actually raise funds outside the church walls. And I'll just share one story to bring this to an example for you guys. But we had a church that was paying off the church debt. And it wasn't a very large church, a church of about 90 people, and they owed about $655,000 in debt. And we had gone through this prayer journey. And I was standing out in front of the church with the pastor one day, and I noticed they had a skate park in front of the church, and I'd seen that for a while. But this time I noticed a couple broken off business signs in there, and I just asked the pastor, "What's that about?" And he said, "Well, if a ramp breaks down, we'll call one of these businesses, they'll chip in a couple $100 and they'll fix the ramps and off the kids go." And I said, "Is there any chance you have a list of all the businesses that have ever sponsored the skate park over the year?" And he had no idea. He'd only been to church a couple of years, but he did some research and he developed quite a list. And I said, "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to invite them all to the church for a dinner as a thank you. And we have one rule. Nobody from the church can attend because we wanted to fill it up with community people. They can serve at the event, but not attend." And while they ate their dinner, we actually had local artists paint paintings live on stage, and we auctioned those paintings off that night. We literally paid off all of the church debt in one night outside the church walls money from this process. But that wasn't the best part of the story. The best part of the story was 3 months later, they were running over 300 people because a lot of these people brought their families and called this their church home. Wow. So that's what we do from a community aspect when we walk through these doors that God opens.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty cool. The skate park for the
fun.
win right there.
Yeah. Who would have thought, right?
Right. I mean, that's crazy. And I think an interesting point to pull out is that was a pretty small church that did a fundraising campaign, right? Like in your way, right? Like vision campaign with all the other elements to it. But it wasn't a big church. Like, so this isn't reserved for big mega churches or, churches of thousands. This is like even churches of hundreds can do this kind of stuff.
Yep. Absolutely. And what I find is when God gives the lead pastor a vision, our Lord has the finances to provide for that vision. Our responsibility simply is getting in alignment with what Christ is doing and follow the power of the Holy Spirit in this process. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's what we do. And we have seen a lot of small churches raise an exorbitant amount of money that you wouldn't think would be possible because the Lord has provided in additional ways that we did not see when we all first sat down and started having those
Right,
conversations.
right.
Yeah.
What other ways are you guys kind of bringing in the external community? Like, again, I don't know, give me a few more like
Sure.
thoughts or things that you've seen or done along the way where,
Sure.
you've brought
Sure.
in outside businesses to help raise money.
Yeah, so I'll give you one. We happened to have the opportunity to do a project for a church in Watts, Los Angeles. And through this process, one thing churches need to know out there is when they're praying and fasting, we're praying and fasting because a lot of times God will speak to us and then I'll call up the lead pastor and say, "Hey, I feel like God's saying this. What are you hearing? Does this resonate with you?" And so this was one of those cases where we had 9 months and we needed to raise literally almost $1 million
Mm-hmm.
for this church to be able to purchase a facility that was otherwise going to be sold out from underneath them. And so what we did is we had a concert, a benefit concert held at another large church in Southern California, hosted it for us. And it was about a month and a half before the concert. And this was before the pandemic and all of this, and before a lot of churches were doing this. But God woke me up in the middle of the night and he just put on my heart to live stream the concert. Well, I called the artist and I said, "Hey, I feel like we're supposed to live stream this." And he was like, "No way, man." He goes, "If you live stream my band, it's going to sound terrible. That we're not doing that." And I told him, I said, "Well, I feel like the Lord's telling me we have to do this. Like, how are we going to do this?" And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what." He said, "I'll play a 9-song set before the regular concert, just myself and a guitar. You can live stream that. And then I'll do the full concert." Well, we'd raised about half of the money after that concert night. We got down to about 30 days left, and every dollar came in to purchase that facility because we were obedient to live stream it.
Wow.
And people continued to give after the effect. So
Right.
that gives you an idea. Every campaign's totally different, but that would give you another outside of the box kind of
Right.
concept that we use.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Okay. Take me another step. Like, what are the steps in the process of like kind of like the nuts and bolts of raising the money?
Mm-hmm. Well, really, it really hinges on prayer. And as we go through the prayer process, what starts to happen is we see hearts transform.
Yeah.
Literally, we see heart transform. And so what happens is in a lot of cases, and I'll share one with you, we had a church that had 209 giving units in the church. And of those 209 giving units, 13 of them gave 80% of the funds. This is pretty typical in America where a few support a majority of the church.
Right.
Well, through the heart transformation process, their monthly giving after 4 months, they had so much heart transformation. After 4 months, their monthly giving tripled, literally tripled.
Wow.
Now, that church did not grow numerically, but what happened is heart transformation took place. And they went from 13 giving units providing 80% of the funds to 134 giving units supplying 80% of the funds. And so we see this happen a lot with the churches we work with, where it's a residual impact.
Mm-hmm.
Because the heart transformations have taken place, not only are they raising the funds for their project, but they're seeing life transformation and generosity take over within the individual. And that has much larger impact on the church than even the campaign does. And so that's one of those residual impacts when we get down and we really look at what's the difference and how are we raising these funds. Yeah, there's systematic things, there's pledge cards, there's things like that, of course.
Right.
But there's also that heart transformation that takes place, and all of a sudden the church is sitting there where, hey, we now have more money for ministry as opposed to just raising funds for the project.
Right. Yeah. For that particular thing.
Yep.
What kind of analysis, you kind of mentioned giving units and that kind of thing. So it sounds like you're doing some kind of analysis of the church and the membership and weekly giving, yearly giving, like that, you're trying to understand kind of from the financial side of the church, how things are going and kind of what it looks like. And then maybe that leads to some insight into, what's possible. And we know anything's possible with God and prayer and all that kind of but you
Sure.
probably do some sort of like, okay, it looks like you could do this and that could be reasonable. Now what, where is God going to show up in the whole thing? But walk
Sure.
us through that analysis. Like, how do you help churches look at their, the church and the finances to kind of understand how to think about this?
Yeah. Here's been our experience. Our experience is when we do those deep dive analysis kind of pieces, what we're finding is typically a campaign consultant company would say, whatever your annual budget is, you should be able to raise 1.5 times to 2 times that number. That is a typical analysis that's done. What we're seeing happen in churches that are engaged into the process, we are seeing sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 times that annual budget being able to be raised. So we go into it with the mind's eye of here's what's typically possible, but we don't close the door on that. So,
Right.
for example, I'll just give you an example. We're not going to put the thermometer on the wall where we color it in as the money comes in, because again, we feel like that's a box or an expectation we're putting upon things.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see what the Lord has in store. So we do responsible analysis, but we also, for lack of a better term, treat it with a grain of salt, because we've seen so many times the Lord show up in obscure ways that only the Lord could show up.
Right.
And so in a lot of ways, it renders that feasibility study, if we want to call it that, irrelevant. And so we go into it with our eyes wide open, but we also leave room for the Holy Spirit to work, if that
Right.
helps.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. How do you do that analysis? What does that look like? Like, what do you look at in the church?
So typically, to be honest, we usually have this conversation with the church, and they will just basically share with us, here's what our average weekly giving is, here's what our budget is, here's where we are staff wise as opposed to building wise, and in the cost structure of things, and just being able to look at that gives us a really good idea of where's the health of the church, what needs to really be focused on, because we might run into that first example I shared with you where 13 giving units were giving the majority of the funds. If we run into that situation, we know that the stewardship component that we offer within the campaign has to be a focus point,
right?
Because that's where we're going to gain true heart transformation. We might run into another church that doesn't have quite that issue, and it's a more balanced approach. Now that's rare, but it could be.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, then maybe the focus switches somewhere else, but everybody would still go through that same process.
Right. Yeah, I love that. Maybe we can kind of move into just the topic of like money in churches and leadership, talking about money. I mean, sometimes in our experience, it's actually quite often that, like, pastors talking about money is uncomfortable. Most don't really want to do it. They weren't trained in how to do it. There's lots of reasons, right? So what's been your experience when it comes to like
my experience is, my dad was a pastor. I've served as a pastor in the past, and I've worked with a lot of pastors. And I know that talking about money is probably one of two of the hardest subjects that a pastor has to face and talk about. And you're right, they're not necessarily trained in that area to be able to do that. And I think one thing that's unfairly placed upon our lead pastors in the country, or the world for that matter, is that just because they're a lead pastor, we expect them to be an expert in every category.
Everything, right.
Everything. They're supposed to run the build project. They're supposed to be the contractor. They're supposed to be all of it.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, they're called by the Lord to oversee and lead people and reach people for Christ, and that's their calling. And so it doesn't surprise me that this area is a struggle for a lot of pastors. And so one thing that we do when we go in, we train the stewardship side of things. One of my rules is whoever teaches this in the church, it can't be the pastor, and it can't be somebody who's on staff with the church. Because what we want to do is we want to train somebody who locks arms with the people within the church, that is somebody who ministers from a marketplace ministry standpoint within that church. They have a business career, he or she does, or whatever the case may be. We want to train that person up, because when they hear this information from that person, their ears open up in a whole different way.
Right.
It's almost like the pastor could stand up week after week, and whatever topic it is, they could speak upon it, and certain things will seep into an individual, but they will always hear it in a different way than if somebody who's they consider a colleague at their level, so to speak, speaks the same thing.
So now we're getting into the nuts and bolts. And now you're giving me some
now we're
insight.
getting somewhere,
like,
man.
okay, so you're doing the thing and all the pieces we've talked about, prayer and bringing people along, and there's tons of transformation, but you're like, I'm getting a key leader in the church, a lay leader, somebody who's not on staff, who somehow has a good standing reputation in the church, has been a business leader of some sort, maybe, or done well in their career, and is obviously aligned with the vision and excited about where the church is going. But you want them on stage, you want them in front of the congregation. I'm sure some of the staff is also doing it too somehow, but
sure, they're involved to some level, but they're not the mouthpiece of that particular topic.
Got it.
So
What's it like recruiting that person? Or do most of the churches go, oh, I know who I got the guy or gal that is perfect for this?
Yeah. So everybody we choose through this, we do through prayer, and we take a couple days and pray and fast on. And what we find is the Lord tends to really bring that person's name to the lead pastor's heart pretty quickly.
Right.
Usually it's not a mystery. It's not a deep dig. And then when they get to me, for me to be able to train that individual, it's usually like, man, this person's perfect for this, and a lot of times we're looking for somebody in their own personal life that has an obedience story, and it doesn't have to be with finances. It can be with a life decision they made, but some sort of testimony around obedience that they can share.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of in the closing segment here, how do you help churches celebrate? You get to the end of this, or you're close, or, there's some portion where, you want the church to kind of experience the journey of it, but then also achieving the goal. Maybe it doesn't always happen, but as that's happening, what's your experience been, or how do you help churches kind of with the end stages and celebrating and all of that?
Well, we always encourage them to bring the entire congregation together in a celebrational moment. The church in Watts that I shared with you, when that goal was reached, everybody in the church got in the quad and they all had balloons, and we did a celebration and sent them up into the air. But collective, and I think it's important in these celebration times, even in the prayer times, to involve the youth of our church. A lot of times we think, okay, the parents, the older people, even if they're singles or whatever, but these are the ones that we're communicating with. I actually want to include all the way down through the prayer component, the kids within the church too, so that they have an understanding. Hey, my parents are going through this. It gives them, what is the meaning of fasting and praying? A lot of times people don't learn that discipline until they're adults. And so these are kinds of things we want to involve the entire family. So when we celebrate, we also want to involve the entire family.
Yeah, I love that. We this just kind of happened, so nothing special as a parent, but we do, like in the church I go to, we do missions every year, and there's kind of two different moments, one earlier in the year, one a bit later in the year, for foreign missions and then local missions. And so this past weekend or 2 weekends ago, we kind of took up that offering, or wrapped up that offering. It'd been going on for a few months, and so as a family, we're giving, and my kids, they're telling stories from stage, and they're kind of, there's some people from overseas talking about the churches they've planted, and there's this, it's a big service around all these things. Super cool. And so my kids are like, Dad, are we giving? And I'm like, well, of course. And so they're like, how much? And so I'm like, okay, come here. And so we're all kind of huddle around, we're in church, but we're kind of like,
right. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is family talk, right? So here's how much we give weekly, and the particular campaign, we're trying to give this much, a multiple of our regular weekly giving kind of thing. And so we're chatting as a family, and I'm like, okay, here's what that looks like. And so we pull out our phone. My church obviously uses Tithely. So pull out the phone, and bring up the giving form, and then like, you know, one kid types in the amount, another kid gets to hit the submit button. And then,
that's awesome.
Also we were like, kind of as a ceremonial kind of thing, everyone was writing down how much they were giving and then like walking it kind of up front and putting it in like a box. Right. That was more of just like a fun way of everybody being engaged, but we're giving digitally. So you weren't really like putting checks in or anything like that. So then I have 3 kids. So the third kid wrote it down and brought it up and put it in the box kind of thing. So I loved, like, our kids are curious. Like, our kids are interested. My kids perked up when it was like, oh, we're raising money, and what are we doing as a family? Right. Like, they asked, and I was like, that's super cool. And it was a great moment to kind of like share our faith, you know, mine and my wife's, via generosity, but do it with the kids kind of in the moment.
Absolutely.
I love that. You make that's that awesome. Part of. Yeah. I love that.
That's a great story, man.
It was cool. And it was very unplanned and not like I'm super dad in any way. That just kind of happened. And it was cool. And it was like a God moment that I was, you know, super excited about. So love that you guys do that. I mean, how to, like, I guess wrapping up, we could talk all day about fundraising, but how do folks find you, and, you know, what's the website, and how do people get to know more about you?
Yeah, just come to churchcoachministries.org. Love to have you visit. There's a spot you could drop us an email. You can contact me directly if you want at jeremy@churchcoachministries.org. So love to have a conversation with you. And then we offer different levels of campaigns too. So we have campaigns designed that are a 21-day prayer and fasting approach that are all inclusive, include coaching, and you can raise a sum of probably, you know, $300,000 or less in a 90-day period if you need to get something done quickly. And then we have our more full-blown campaigns. And so I just wanted to share that no matter what church size you are, we can help you through that process, and we can talk about the different processes and applications that we can take a look at for your church.
Yeah, I love that. Everyone go check out Church Coach Ministries. Jeremy's a good dude. And Jeremy, you're speaking at our conference, Modern Church Leader.
I am.
Out in October. So give us a preview. What do you, obviously it's something around vision campaigns or, but
So I'm going to do a presentation on funding ministry through vision and through discipleship. And so we'll take a deep dive into some of the stuff we talked about today and some new things we'll talk about there as well. So join us there, and we'll also have a booth there and the whole bit. You can come visit us.
Oh man, it's going to be awesome. Grateful you guys are coming. Jeremy, this has been awesome. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And thanks for your time, and thank everybody out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks guys for listening. Jeremy's been a great guest. Definitely check him out, and we'll catch you guys next week on another episode of Modern Church Leader. See ya.